And with that, happy Tuesday. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We are streaming live on YouTube where you see a dancing Anthony Haney at the Team 980. Coming up at 5 o'clock, Mitch Tischler joins us for his final regular season-ish edition of Tischler Tuesday, fully playoff mode. As we move forward, a Take Command Tape Tuesday as well at 5:30. Why was the offense so different with Marcus Mariota compared to Jaden Daniels? You've been wondering why. We have the answer coming up at 5:30. We start, though, Anthony, with breaking news. Breaking news. Oh, snap. News is broken. Breaking news. And that breaking news is that the Las Vegas Raiders have created another coach opening in the NFL. They have fired Antonio Pierce just a year after hiring him following the him being, having a kind of a successful, quasi-successful, if you will, run as the interim coach. And that now makes 6 openings around the NFL for head coaches. And then you have the Titans, who also made news today because they fired Rand Carthon, their general manager, which creates actually just a second job opening for a front office position in the NFL, or a general manager's position specifically. It's them and the Jets. However, the Patriots, Bears, Jags, and Saints, who all fired their coaches, are all keeping their general managers. Of course, Dallas is still floating out there. They have Mike McCarthy's contract ending next week. Of course, nothing will happen besides negotiations between now and then because the Cowboys didn't make the playoffs, so they're not waiting on anything. But his contract expires a week after the regular season, or whatever the language is, that it ultimately is going to expire on January 14th. That one is still TBD. I think there's a couple other, things to keep an eye on around the NFL. We've seen some coordinator movement as well, Cincinnati, Seattle, etc. But Anthony, we now have 6 head coach openings and Dallas pending. We're going to take the Cowboys out of it for now. Let's play rank a job. If you're a head coach, if you're the Ben Johnsons or Cliff Kingsbury, or whoever else is going to be the top guys, Liam Cohen, the offensive coordinator for the Bucs, who the Commanders will see this weekend. How do you stack up these jobs? Because I'll tell you right now. Here, let me give my answer, or one answer first. If I'm Cliff specifically, I'm not going anywhere. None of these jobs are appealing to me. So if you're a Commanders fan, I'm gonna say that right now. If I'm Cliff Kingsbury, I look at exactly 0 of these jobs and be like, between the ownership situation, the general manager situation, the quarterback situation, and the cap situation, that's good enough for me to leave Washington when I'm already making head coach money, $7+ million a year from the Arizona Cardinals until 2027. And I can just continue to be an offensive coordinator, something I actually like doing, and learning from Dan Quinn, so that when I do get my next head coaching job, I'm good at it. So I know I threw Cliff's name in there, but if I was Cliff and I was in that kind of position where going isn't a given for me, I would just stay.
Do you think, rekindling or getting back with Caleb Williams would interest him as much as, a lot of media pundits made it seem last year when he was first, on the hiring stages, I guess?
I would say the Bears job is going to be on the top half of my list, but I'm not that interested because I have a general manager who apparently is getting to stay, but is certainly on the hot seat. Like, can he have any more than 1 year if things don't turn around quickly in Chicago? I want to have alignment with my general manager, and ownership has never proved super competent. So I'm good on that. I'll punt.
Yeah, I mean, do you think he's thinking like that, though?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I think one of the things that Cliff has learned being here is how important the relationship is between coach, general manager, and how that alignment not only helps you get the right players and is an important relationship just because that's your closest working person that you work with, but it's also really important in how you set the kind of the culture of the building, to use that magical word. And one of the things Cliff talked about last week when he and Fortier went back and forth on this topic was, Sam asked this great question at the end that was basically like, what would you do differently that you've learned about here that's different than the last time? And he's like, from day one, I would set the expectations and the culture. And last time I tried to do it too late, and, people had already established stuff, and it just doesn't work that way. You have to be very direct, and that doesn't mean like you're a drill sergeant a-hole from day one. It just means that you are trying your best to set the standards and culture and create the atmosphere that you want. And instead of being like, oh, just trying to get in and get everybody's name, like you come in and you set that stuff. If you have a GM that's already there, by nature, you have people that have relationships with that GM. The GM, clearly has some say in the culture already. So there's just a bunch of stuff that you can't start from scratch in the way that I think Cliff wants to start from scratch.
Now, that's fair. And I got just one last question on the Cliff front, just because we do have other job openings. But if you're looking at what happened last year in terms of Bobby Slowick being a candidate to get a job out here with one of these teams, and then you also look at Ben Johnson, Slowick regress isn't really fielding like too many offers, or a lot of people aren't.
No, he should get 0 offers this offseason.
Yeah.
Based off what he did.
And then you got Johnson, people, still love the work that he's doing in Detroit. Do you think Cliff could be thinking on that front, like, all right, I stay here another year in Washington? Not to say we have a terrible year, but like we don't go 12-5 like we did this year because of our schedule. Do you think that is in play at all?
There's got to be some small part of it on a human nature, but I think you have to just trust that you can do a good job, and you're going to be Ben Johnson and not Bobby Slowick. Bobby Slowick's problem isn't that the league soured on him; it's that he did a bad job and the league saw it. It's that anybody who knows football is looking at what the Houston offensive line and protection plans were and their development plan for C.J. Stroud and went, "What? What are you guys trying to do?"
Yeah.
And so if that's the case, that's a no-fly. Like that can't happen. And if you're Cliff, I think you're looking to grow the offense next year, and it's a very, very different approach. And so you're going to be Ben Johnson, where your name is in it again next year and the year after. And I think Cliff will go about it in a very different way than Ben Johnson has, which, the way Johnson has is probably turns people off. I think Cliff will probably just shut down stuff. And if he does ultimately shut down some interviews, I think he'll go about it in a better way than what Ben Johnson did. And I realize that there's probably, if there's any Raiders fans listening, they're like, oh, you mean like last year when we thought we had him? And it's like, yeah, you got into the negotiations and you couldn't come to a contract agreement. And Washington swooped in and got it done and gave him the terms that he was looking for and sold him on a better opportunity. So I don't think that you'll get to that point with Cliff. Like, I think there's going to just be a very different tenor to the conversations, because I think Johnson probably wanted to go maybe last year and thought he would, because he'd already turned down one cycle and then was like, actually, I don't want to. I think Cliff is much more clear-minded going into it. And that's going to be a different thing. So let's play Rank the Jobs next. Which job would you want if you're a head coach? So we've just said, if you're Cliff, the answer is none of them. But if you are someone who is maybe more eager to leave for whatever reason, which of these jobs do you actually want, and in what order? We'll get to that then. Commanders Vibe Check Tuesday, starting at 4:30 on the phones at 301-230-0980. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. And we're taking a look at the open jobs around the NFL. And it's so nice because, Anthony, it was just a year ago that the Commanders were going through this, right?
And?
I mean, Black Monday 1 year ago, Rivera was fired. It's
Ooh.
crazy. It's crazy. Now it's like, sure, we can look at this safely from the outside, knowing that Dan Quinn is all good. Knowing how this ownership group operates, knowing the front office that's in place here. And really the hope is over the next couple of weeks that guys working in this building don't get poached. We already talked in the previous segment that we don't think Cliff Kingsbury will leave for any of these open jobs on the head coaching front. But if we take a look at all of them, let's rank them up. First, Anthony, the resumes. In no particular order. The Patriots. I guess these are in reverse cap space order for whatever that's worth. The Patriots have the most cap space. They also have the number 4 pick, I believe, in the draft, Anthony?
Yep, they have the number 4 pick.
All right, so they have $132 million in cap space, the number 4 pick. The Raiders have $123 million in cap space and the number 5 pick.
Raiders have the 6th pick.
6th pick in the upcoming NFL draft. The Bears, I feel like the other thing we should put in is their quarterback situation. The Patriots have Drake May. The Raiders have Aiden O'Connell as their current incumbent. The Bears have Caleb Williams. The Jags have the 5th pick and then Trevor Lawrence. The Jets have flaming pile of wreckage and actually have no quarterback. Tyrod Taylor might have a 2-year deal, but I think Rodgers is done, but they basically have no quarterback. And they have the 7th pick. The Saints have the 9th pick and Derek Carr. And then the Titans, again, are an honorable mention because they have a GM job, but we're not actually going to really deal with them, although they have the 1st pick and Will Levis. But I think Will Levis's time as the starter in Tennessee is done. But let's kick them out of the list because while it's worth mentioning from a newsworthiness standpoint, we're really focused on the head coaching jobs. So I would do, Anthony, do we want to each have our individual list or do we just want to do this a draft style?
I like draft style.
Okay, I'm taking the 1st pick.
All right, go ahead.
Sorry. I actually think the job that I would take on this list is the New England Patriots.
Yep.
And yes, they have a boatload of cap space, but I don't like they have to spend smartly. Like I don't know that they're going to go sign a big superstar or whatever, and if they do, I think that's the wrong way to go about it. I think in New England, like reestablishing the Patriot way and like we're going to be smart, we're going to be tough, we're going to be physical, and we're going to have our quarterback help us out. Like there's something to having that attitude, which is probably why they're going to sign Mike Vrabel to be their next head coach. And there is already speculation coming out from reporters. I heard like Judy Batista say this yesterday on NFL Network that for as much as there were legitimate reasons to fire Gerard Mayo, and there's just so much, coming out of that building of that he just was in over his head. And I said this yesterday. I really appreciate Robert Kraft being like, it's my fault that I set Gerard Mayo up to fail. I gave him a job he wasn't ready for. That's not representative of him. That's representative of me. And in the future, I have no doubt he'll be a head coach. He just needs to be an assistant for more time first. Mike Vrabel's ready right now. And Drake May looks outstanding. And they have all this cap space. They have the number 4 pick in a draft that's pretty set up at some other non-quarterback positions. And obviously, people are going to trade up, or if not, just the first 2 picks will be quarterbacks. Even though Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders would have been the probably 7th and 8th quarterbacks in last year's draft. I think this is a pretty good spot. I think it's a pretty blank canvas outside of a legitimate franchise quarterback. And if they get Vrabel, or frankly, they could go other directions, but if Vrabel will be the guy that I want, then you just need to get a good offensive coordinator. And I might even just keep Alex Van Pelt. Like the guy who's there, like did a pretty good job with May. And so if you just keep that relationship going, get Vrabel in there to run everything and really make a huge impact on that defense, like I think the Patriots could be a pain in the butt as soon as next year.
Yeah, I love the Patriots job just because they have so much space or cap space to do what and basically approach how they want to run that team through free agency. Like, they can spend aggressively offensively, or they can do it defensively. So
got to
definitely
attack the
love
line. And like,
Patriots.
is the tackle from LSU still supposed to be like one of the top 5 picks? The left tackle
Campbell.
from LSU?
Yep.
So, like, let's say the first 2 picks are quarterback and the third pick is Travis Hunter.
He's
Cool.
right there.
Franchise left tackle available at number 4. Don't even have to move. Sick. Sign me up.
All right. So pick number 2 for me, I would probably lean. I would go Bears. And I'm interested to see who you pick number 3 because I'm torn a little bit. But I think I would go Bears. I think Caleb, I think he's still going to be good, man. I think he definitely had a tough first year. He also had 2 different offensive coordinators. I don't think they did a good job of, just trying to develop him as we saw, Cliff and Dan do with Jaden Daniels. So I just think he just had a rough, first year. And defensively, I still think they have the pieces intact. But if you're on the field all the time, obviously, you're going to give up stuff. And I'm not going to say they were, perfect throughout the year, but I think they did play good in spots. But, again, if your offense is constantly going 3 and out or not making it to the 50, not putting points on the board, it's going to be hard to, continue to, limit teams when you're constantly on the field all the time. So I think defensively they're going to be okay. Caleb's going to figure things out. You have $73 million in cap. I like this job.
I think that's the obvious second choice. They have a lot of talent, much of it signed up. Like DJ Moore's locked in. They gave him that extension in camp. Rome Odunze is a first rounder. Their right tackle, Darnell Wright, is a top 10 pick from 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. Some of these guys have to play better, but you have the franchise quarterback. You have some weapons. You have defensive guys. I mean, Montez Sweat, again, is not like a world beater at defensive end, but he's a very solid player. You're probably overpaying him, but he's locked in. There's a level of stability. My only drawback with the Bears job, or my only 2 drawbacks are, I don't know how much I want to work with Ryan Poles, and am I wasting a year where Poles is just going to get fired after the year if we're not that good again? Or do I interview and I'm like, actually, no, Ryan Poles is not the problem here, because he's definitely made a lot of silly draft picks and probably been, I think, bad at managing the resources. Like, the Sweat trade's a perfect example. Like, Montez Sweat's a good player. The Commanders would probably be a little bit better with him this year. I don't know how much better. But getting what they got for him, the picks and the financial flexibility, is much better in the long term for Washington. Why isn't the same thing true for the Bears? Like, why didn't the Bears just take the 40th pick and take someone who they feel can develop into Montez Sweat and take the $25 million they spend on Montez Sweat per year and distribute that elsewhere in the roster? Or just wait for Montez Sweat to hit free agency and sign him. Like, there was no, outside of just making sure that he was a Bear and not having to battle in free agency, like, what's more valuable, paying Montez Sweat 27 or 28 per year versus 25 per year and keeping the second round pick? Like, I don't know. Those are the decisions that the GM has to make, but it does feel like Poles has made some along the way. And there's a couple other examples where I'm like, I don't know about that. That said, I'm not in love with any of the other GMs that I'd be stuck working with anyway. So there's also that. The third one here really comes down to whether or not you prefer a good quarterback to work with, or do you want a little more freedom and flexibility? Screw it. This feels hot takey, but I'm doing it for a reason. I just have to stick to my convictions, but it's not because I want to do a hot take. I'm going to put the Raiders next.
Ooh.
I love that they have $123 million in cap space. I don't love that they have the 6th pick and need a quarterback. But if I can wait if you tell me, hey, Mark Davis, who has been a championship owner in the WNBA and, has not been afraid, he's not afraid to be bold. They have a great facility out there. Allegiant's great. It's Vegas. Like, recruiting guys to play as free agents should not be that hard. Like, hey, we might suck this year, but next year we're going to hit the ground running. Let me continue to build. Let me build a culture. Let's do it the right way. And then it comes down to, do you like Tom Telesco, their general manager? But I would want to have that conversation with Telesco. I'm pretty sure I know how I feel about Trent Baalke and the Jags, and I don't think I want any piece of Trent Baalke, nor after listening to Shad Khan's press conference yesterday. I mentioned on yesterday's show, I had that on in the background as I was watching some film, and I would just look up every couple of minutes and be like, he just said what? Like, I don't want any part of the ownership in Jacksonville. So I'd probably take the Raiders and hope that I can be the one to shape that organization in the right direction, one that's not afraid to be bold and one that's got some resources at its disposal.
Yeah, Raiders were the other team I was back and forth with for number 2 anyway. I think fourth, I will go Jets. You
can freaking have them.
I mean, it's what other options do you have? I definitely don't want to go to Jacksonville because of what's his name, Shad Khan.
Shad Khan, the owner.
Shad Khan, and yeah, the
Buddy,
fact he said
if you think the Jets ownership situation is bad or the Jags ownership situation is bad, I have bad things to tell you about the Jets. Woody Johnson sucks, and the whole family situation there, his kids getting meddling and being involved, like that one is dead last. I would rather have the Saints negative $81 million in cap space than I would work for the Jets.
Good gracious. I mean, it's not a lot we're working with down here.
No, it's not. This is why Cliff ain't going anywhere, in my humble opinion. It's also why if I was Dallas, I would 100% move on from Mike McCarthy.
Yeah.
You're getting your pick of the litter, man.
Yeah, this is bad stuff.
Like, I'd much rather work for Jerry Jones than Woody Johnson. Not even close.
I will say this about the Jets, just as an org, and why I would choose them over the Jags anyway. They've had some success. We haven't really seen much success from Jets.
They're interviewing Rex Ryan, who was the last coach to take them to the playoffs in 2012.
Have we seen Jacksonville?
Yes. Jacksonville's made an AFC Championship game since then.
2017
with Blake freaking Bortles.
Yeah, Blake Bortles and Jalen Ramsey and company. All right, yeah, never mind. I don't know, Craig. I don't really have a good reasoning for any of these organizations at the bottom.
That's the correct answer, actually. All right,
Okay.
I'm just going to rank them. I'm going to rank them because we're out of time and they all stink. I would go the Saints next. And I know that feels crazy because they're in short-term absolute cap hell. But they have shown to be a competent organization. I know their ownership situation is super messy because they had an old guy who got remarried and the kids, and it's like soap opera stuff. But I do think that, like, Mickey Loomis kind of runs the show there, and he's a competent GM who's done some things over the years. They're in a really, really bad way cap-wise, but I think it's like they're a year away from being potentially able to get out of it. I would probably see if you can move on from Derek Carr, see if you can recoup a 4th-round pick or whatever for him. I would probably just go into next year starting Spencer Rattler and see where the wind blows. And if Rattler turns out, because he showed some flashes at times, if he turns out to be a player, great. If not, I'm at the top of the draft next year in a much better quarterback class. I would probably be willing to take on that job and just have a little bit of patience. And I get to live in New Orleans, which is fun. I would then take on the Jags job. Then it would be the Jets. Because at least with the Jags, I get Trevor Lawrence. Trent Baalke's a nightmare, in my opinion, but, like, he's a known commodity. And, like, he's done some good stuff. They're trying to build out the medical staff and the facilities and all that kind of stuff down there. And Brian Thomas Jr. is really great. Like, I can do a lot worse than Trevor Lawrence and Brian Thomas Jr. The Jets have very few players, a disaster of an owner.
Solid.
Sauce is great. Garrett Wilson's great. They've got, again, very few players. Quinnen Williams is great. But, man, they're just a lost organization. The only good side to the Jets is you and the GM can go together. Other than that, big, giant, sad sack franchise. Jets. Jets. That's the rankings. Pats, Bears, Raiders, Saints, Jags, Jets. All right, when we get back, the vibes are much better in Washington. So let's do a vibe check, shall we? It's Vibe Check Tuesday. We've asked this question once before. How are you feeling going into Game 1 against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? This time, it's Game 1 of the playoffs. Last time, it was Game 1 of the regular season. Vibe Check Tuesday at 301-230-0980. Next on The Hoffman Show.
Capitals coach Spencer Carver.
Dang, those jobs suck.
Wednesday morning at 7 on the Team 980.
It's Hoffman's show here on the Team 980. Always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We are streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. And it's a Vibe Check Tuesday. And let me know if this sounds familiar. The Commanders are prepared to start the next phase of their season against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Yeah, week 1, Redux. This time, playoffs. How do you feel going into this? 301-230-0980 is the phone number, 301-230-0980. And Anthony, when we were doing Take Command this morning, it was a very funny show in a weird way, because I kept kind of having to stop and be like, by the way, they won, and they've won 5 straight games. And this is a bit of a silly thing where right now I definitely don't love the way the Commanders are playing. I think there is a lack of crispness. There's a lack of detail that is not up to the standard that is them playing their best. And I know I'm not alone in this, not just amongst the fan base or amongst other media types. I know that Dan Quinn and Joe Witt and Cliff Kingsbury agree with me because every time they get to the podium, that's what they're saying as well. They're like, yeah, we have to do this better. We have to get these runs targeted. We have to make sure on defense we're more disciplined in our gaps. And I think we did a really good job on Take Command. And by we, I mean I led Logan to water, and then he just had a super soaker and then sprayed us with all the information, slash drank. That we did a good job of explaining on that show in painstaking detail, if you would like to get the podcast version, of some of the ways where this defense and this offense are just not executing to that level. I think the radio shorter summarized version before we get to the phones at 301-230-0980 is there's clear room for opportunity. A lot of this stuff, I think, is on the players to lock into details that the coaches are giving them. We can go through examples if you want, but I do feel like it's right there. And especially on offense, I think Jaden just had a bad day at the office. Like I think the leg soreness, maybe that bothered him a little bit, but whatever it was, whatever caused it to be off, he still saw the field really well. I think initially I thought he didn't, and if you watch like the first series back, you're like, what is that? But basically after that series, he has a bunch of throws that go off receivers' hands that he usually hits. He's got guys that, sometimes it's on Jaden. He's also got guys that are dropping balls. And these are players that have been fairly reliable this year. So I think with that, I, in a way, like feel okay going into the playoffs because I trust this team to lock it in and go. But I'm also nervous because this is kind of how they've been surviving for a month. And now they're going to play arguably their best opponent in that stretch outside of Philadelphia, depending on what you feel about the version of Philadelphia that Washington played after Jalen Hurts exited that game in the first quarter. And the question becomes, is this good enough to win against a genuinely good playoff caliber Tampa team versus the Cowboys and the Titans and some of the other teams that they've beaten in this 5-game win streak?
Yeah, that's how I've been looking at it, Craig. Like, I feel like there have been games where we should have been a little bit more dominant just because we know the level of execution that Washington has played with, when they've been at their best. We've seen them go out there and put up 40-plus points multiple times this season, and it's just like we're playing the Saints. We're playing we blew out the Titans. We're playing the Saints, the Cowboys,
the Falcons.
These are teams like we should have, also went out there and put up 30-plus, maybe not 40, or just look a little bit
I'm glad you – hold on, just real quick. I think it's also worth pointing out that, like, the way that you played, specifically the Saints, the Falcons, and the Cowboys, teams that their run defense has been bad all year, and you couldn't run on them. And that's supposed to be a part of who you are. I think that is a huge factor here.
Yeah, that too. So, again, just the execution, going back to like what you were talking about, the drops, the not seeing the field outside of the first drive, obviously. But it's just like that's what we expect as we inch closer to the end of the season. And teams always want to say you want to be, clicking in December. Like you want to be hitting your stride. And I'm not going to say we've necessarily not hit our stride, but at the same token, it's sort of kind of we've taken a step back from where we were. So I'm a little, cautiously optimistic about where we are going into the playoffs, just because December, especially against inferior teams, we should have really been clicking, hitting our stride. And offensively, I don't think we've done that. You talk about the run game, you talk about the passing game, like it all. And we won.
They're undefeated. They just went undefeated in December. So what are we even talking about? Like, this is the weird thing about the NFL, especially because we have so much time that we spend analyzing these games, and then it's really 3.5 hours on a Sunday. And it's like, oh, yeah, but at the end, they have more points than the other team. Isn't that the point? It's like, oh, yeah, but also, like, we're trying to project it forward and give our best guess, which is a silly thing that we do because watch the NFL every week. Crazy stuff happens. Bryce Young looked like the worst quarterback in the entire league, got benched for Andy Dalton, and then by the end of the season, he's dropping 44 and walking off in overtime. He's throwing Steph Curry-style no-look touchdown passes. Like, that's the NFL. Some weeks Will Levis is good Will Levis. Some weeks Will Levis is most weeks Will Levis. Like, you have wild variance. And, like, even this year, I mean, people wanted to, like, the Chiefs discourse this week was so stupid. Like, oh, they're ducking the Bengals. One, the Bengals didn't control their own destiny. So they needed extra help. And I guess that would have happened because Miami lost had the Chiefs somehow beaten the Broncos. But the Chiefs had no responsibility to anybody. They're not ducking anybody. They handled their business. And the Bengals lost to the Patriots in week 1. You know, some of the other teams that, you know, if Baltimore's like, dang, I wish we had a better seed, and didn't come down to the end of the regular season where Lamar has to play in week 18. They lost to the Raiders, I think it was, early on in the season. Like, they had some really dumb losses. They lost to the Browns, right? I remember them or the Steelers lost to the Browns. One of them lost in the division to the Browns. So, like, these teams, like, it's a wacky league. Stuff happens. But I think when you look overall, the consistency of it, I think the thing that's in a way frustrating and I would say concerning if I'm DQ is the mistakes are constant, but they're not consistent. In other words, I got a missed target run here. We just didn't do a good enough job. Like, we went to the right place, but we failed on a technique here. That time we got the right read from the quarterback, but he missed the throw. Next time, he misses the read, or the receiver runs the wrong route, or the running back goes the wrong way. There's a play in the game where Eckler goes the wrong way, and Jaden actually turns it into a 5-yard gain because it's a zone read. He realizes that the hole that is open is the one that the running back is supposed to go through, but there's no running back there to take the ball from him, so he just runs into that hole himself, which is kind of genius. So there's things like that keep happening time over time over time, and I think eliminating those and just being like, oh, that was a good, clean, crisp, low penalty to no penalty performance would feel a lot better than the way that they've won these 5 in a row, but they've also won 5 in a row. So how are folks feeling about it? 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. Your call's next on a Vibe Check Tuesday. It's Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Streaming live on YouTube as well at the Team 980. And all the phone lines are open. I'm like, is anybody... Here's the thing, Anthony. The weather's... It's nasty outside still. Like, it's better than it was yesterday, obviously, because it was still, like, snowing sideways. And we were in, like, phase 2 of the snow yesterday at this time. But it's still icy. Like, my car's still stuck. I'd have to go down an ice chute of an alley to get to a main road. So hopefully tomorrow do that. But sometimes when there's not as many people driving, there's not going to be as many people calling. Because, like, for lots of folks that love to listen to the show, they're stuck at home trying to entertain their kids, which is something that they thought they'd be done with this week. After 2 weeks at home, hey, it's a Christmas break, woo! And then it's like, all right, kids, back to school. No.
Nope.
All right. We're out of shows. We can't, I guess we can have a snowball fight for a little bit, but like, then what do we do? So that's my theory on the lack of calls for today's show.
I would agree, sir.
But you know, people are chiming in.
The YouTube comment section.
So earlier on in the show, I think people did make an interesting point that perhaps we underrated Vegas as a. Actually, I don't know that we did though. I mean, we did put it third behind the team that drafted Caleb Williams and the team that drafted Drake May. But remember, last year Cliff was being courted by Vegas. And he's got that house out in Arizona. You know, this time of year is hard to recruit people here in DC. Don't let them, unless they're real cold weather fiends. But I do think that, like, look, they already had an issue last year with the coaching contract stuff. Like, are they really going to go back to Cliff? And is Cliff really going to be like, hey, I know we couldn't get the contract worked out last year, but like, let's do it now. Also, he would be working with a GM that he does. I don't think he and Tom Telesco, the former Chargers GM who took over last year at the top of the Raiders. I don't know that he and Tom Telesco have a great relationship. And maybe they do. Maybe they've known each other in football circles. And if they do, then somebody please tell me. But like, if I'm Cliff, I'm not that interested in working with a GM that I don't know. Like if I'm Cliff, I want to go somewhere where I can bring one of the people from the Commanders front office. I'm like, Lance Newmark, me and you, let's go. And if Newmark doesn't get poached by Ben Johnson, apparently that's Johnson's guy. That wherever he wants to go, which, by the way, could mean we're in for another Ben Johnson no-go cycle. Because I don't think Ben Johnson's going to the Jets. And, like, if you're the Jags and you want to hire Ben Johnson, right? Hey, man, I'll talk to you, but Balky's got to go. Like, I'm bringing my own guy. Me, I know who I want. Like, we're going to do the GM. You can talk to him, but, like, we're a package deal. And you're Shad Khan, and you're going to pick Trent Baalke over Lance Newmark and Ben Johnson. It appears that's the case. And so that's kind of the wacky thing about this whole job market is add the Cowboys in too. Like, the Cowboys have a $60 million quarterback who is now in his 30s and has had injury issues. But hopefully Dak will be good to go next year for them. You paid CD. Now you got to figure out Micah. You have limited cap flexibility, and you know that your GM is never going to manage the cap in a way that like the Eagles do, where they extend guys early and can keep all this talent they accumulate. So even though Will McClay is one of the best draft guys in the league, like, you're always going to be battling from behind the 8 ball. So the Cowboys are not that, and you literally can't bring a GM with you because Jerry Jones is not interested in giving up the GM title. So that's a yikes. You have the Jags, who are keeping Trent Baalke. You have Telesco, who was hired last year by Mark Davis in Vegas. You have Mickey Loomis in place in New Orleans. And the Jets are the only place that you have Elliott Wolf, who at least is, like, I think pretty well respected up there in New England. And then you have the Jets, where you can bring your GM, but you both have to work for Woody Johnson, and absolutely forget that. So I know that Vegas has no state income tax, and it's really great to get around. And the stadium is really nice, and the practice facility is great. And being like awesome as the Raiders comes with a certain cachet because of their franchise history, and the colors are cool. But hell no, if I'm Cliff Kingsbury, I don't want that job.
I mean, I feel like if I'm Ben Johnson or Cliff, the Bears, the Jags.
The Bears and the Patriots are the only two I consider.
Yeah.
And I don't.
Those are the only
and here's
two.
the difference, right? The difference in Ben Johnson and Cliff is, one, Cliff's done it before, so it's not a new itch to scratch.
Okay.
And two, he's getting paid like a head coach right now because he got a contract extension from the Arizona Cardinals in 2021 that goes through 2027. And I know Ben Johnson's making good offensive coordinator money because they paid him each of the last 2 years to stay. That was part of the deal. So he's probably making like $2 million a year. Cliff is making whatever he's making here. I'm guessing he's making like $1 million plus as an OC here, plus 7.5 from the Cardinals. He doesn't need it. Ben Johnson doesn't need it. I mean, how much money does one person? I mean, making over $1 million a year is like, that's a lot of money. He's got kids in school up there. Like, there's a lot of things to consider. But from a football standpoint, I don't know that I'd take either job. The Bears, if I'm Johnson with that amount of talent, depending on what I think of Caleb Williams, is tempting. But I would say that I'm probably good on all that. All right, Mitch Tischler joins us next as we get back into the Commanders and where they're at headed into the playoffs. Mitchell will talk to us about some of the things that not only we have questions about, some of the things we've talked about with Mitch over the last couple of weeks when we've been discussing the offensive line issues and the corner issues and all these different things. But also, what are the things that we actually feel good about going into the playoffs? Plus, what was it like in the locker room post-game with the Jaden Daniels situation? Mitch has all the answers next on The Hoffman Show. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We are streaming live on YouTube as well at the Team 980. And at 5 o'clock on a Tuesday, it's time for a Tischler Tuesday and Not My Beat.
Today's top story from the perspective of someone who's there.
You are looking live.
This just in.
Not My Beat.
He was there in Dallas and apparently had one hell of a time getting home. Mitch Tischler, co-host of the Beltway Football Podcast, with us. Mitchell, I heard flight cancellation, New York drive?
Yeah, it was a little bit of a nightmare. Thanks to American Airlines for canceling my Sunday night flight that would have gotten me back to D.C. before a single flake of snow hit the ground. Unfortunately, they decided to cancel that flight, and the ripple effect had me stuck in New York City last night, renting a car and making a 3-4 hour drive through the snow and ice and all the fun to get back home. Also, I could be here ready to join you, listening to some Avicii and air horns, getting ready for some playoff football.
Well, I mean, I'd hope that at least the end part is good. I'm not going to say worth it. I mean, we could have taken your call from anywhere, Mitchell, and I would have rather you just been home nice, safe, sound, and rested. That sucks. Anthony had a similar experience, actually, almost on Sunday. He had a flight from Indy where he was watching Zaire and friends for the last game of the regular season, a ticket that he got long ago thinking that game could mean something. Whoops. And then his flight got canceled, and then he had to get on another flight. And I don't get why the airlines get to make that call. I'm like, why could Anthony have gotten on one flight on one airline but not another? Why isn't it the airport that's making that call? Being like, no, these planes are done. Other than that, airlines, get your planes off. What are we doing?
Yeah, it was ugly. Apparently, DCA was closed pretty much all day yesterday, which the airline certainly knew when they kept telling me that the flights were going to take off. But all's well that ends well. I made it home, and the Commanders have a win going into the playoffs. Get a little bit of momentum from Terry McLaurin.
No doubt about it. And also, the brand is strong, Mitchell, which is nice. As we said that you were coming on in the YouTube chat, we have someone who just left a lot of potato emojis. So, holy potatoes, let's talk some football.
Holy potatoes indeed. I mean, listen, this beginning of the season, 12 wins, but six seed in the playoffs. No one would have expected any of that.
No,
it's it's been a crazy season with this team winning games every which way, and I'm so excited about what this thing's going to look like this weekend and hopefully the next couple of weekends.
For sure. And we're going to get into all that in a second. I do want to go back, since you were in Dallas and in the locker room and doing all the post-game stuff on Sunday night. Obviously, it was kind of a wacky day with Daniels getting sat at halftime. Dan Quinn gives us the leg soreness story. I don't think it really holds up as told, although I don't really have a problem with what I'm pretty sure the real version is, which is, yeah, it was week 18, and nobody cares if you pull your quarterback when you've already clinched the playoff spot in week 18. If there's any inkling that something could be wrong, and go ahead, get Marcus those snaps. Like, fine. I just thought it was funny that Dan was like, yeah, if it was week 12, I would have done the same thing. Where Jaden is like, yeah, if it wasn't that situation, they would have had to drag me off the field. What was it like in the locker room, and in the press conference room, kind of sorting through all that on Sunday night?
Yeah, it was interesting. My only issue with kind of the way that they went about this last Sunday was clearly Jaden was in the game, but they clearly didn't put together a big time game plan. It was a pretty basic set of offensive plays, almost like what you would do in a preseason game with him. Right away, that there's an issue when Biotish is unable to go and Micah Parsons is going right up the middle and getting after the quarterback. And at that point, if you're not gonna go in there and really play to try and win the game, which obviously would have secured the sixth spot and everything ended up well. So it's great that happened, but they kind of dipped their toe in the water. They didn't, this team, which is this coaching staff, which has been preaching consistency and wanting to go forward and be aggressive and winning time moments and all these different things. And then we got to week 18 and it was kind of half a preseason game and half a regular season game.
A half-baked potato, if you will, Mitchell.
What's that?
A half-baked potato, if you will.
If you will. If you didn't want Jaden to get hurt, you shouldn't have played him, and you should have just gone with Mariota. And quite frankly, with the team that the Cowboys were trotting out there, there was always a chance that Mariota was going to be enough to win the game himself. And ultimately, when he came in, that's what happened. So that was my only kind of real beef with the way that they handled this. I didn't like it once all the offensive linemen were out and injured, and then you're kind of just trying to get Jaden some snaps, which I don't know that at this point in the season he needs.
Right. And, then it's kind of they're doing it for Jaden, but then Frankie goes out, he comes back in, Coleman goes out, comes back in, goes back out again. So it just seemed inconsistent. But ultimately, the franchise quarterback that is your most important player, let's make sure he doesn't get hurt in a Week 18 game. That's not meaningless, but it's not as meaningful as having him healthy in the playoffs. I have no problem with it. It was just the messaging was weird. So I was curious if there's anything more from being in the locker room on Sunday night. Obviously, one of the great things that has happened this season that you, I'm sure, got to talk to this guy about and talk to a bunch of other folks about is Terry setting the touchdown record. The way it goes down, being a game winner, just feels so appropriate for this season. What was the vibe like around Terry in the locker room? And for a guy that we've all gotten to know since he got here, to have this turnaround and for it to end with that history, what did it mean to him and what did it mean to his teammates?
Yeah, I mean, there was a ton of excitement for Terry and about Terry, not just the fact that it was, the game-winning play, which obviously almost makes it, that much more, but for a guy who's as well-respected in that locker room as anybody else that walks through those doors, to go out and to be able to, for them to be able to get him that record, get him that status, meant so much to everybody. And, as you look at what the Bucs did with Mike Evans in Week 18, they trotted him back out there at the end of the game and, threw him a, whatever it was, 5-yard pass to make sure that he got over 1,000 yards. Felt kind of cheap because the Bucs were so far ahead in that game. But for Terry to be able to go ahead and do that in an important moment in the game, to secure the win, to secure the 6th playoff spot, was just, was a perfect full circle for everything that this team has been through, for everything that he's been through. And it's awesome to add Marcus Mariota to the list of all the different quarterbacks that have thrown touchdowns to Terry McLaurin in his career, because that guy has been through so much. And to see this offense have as much success as it had this year, along with Jaden Daniels, it's great. It's encouraging. And I think it points towards a lot of great things in the future.
At the very least, Terry's going into the Ring of Fame, depending on how the next 3 years go. Like, we could be talking about a guy who's in the mix for the Hall of Fame. I think whenever he goes to whatever the biggest ceremony he's going to have is, Ring of Fame, Ring of Honor, jersey retirement, or Hall of Fame. You know how the Browns fans have the jerseys that have all the quarterbacks on them? I think Terry should get his own version of that to wear to that ceremony. And then he should probably tear it off and just have a Jaden jersey underneath.
Right. I mean, to start off the way that he has with all the different quarterbacks, and I brought up to Mike Evans getting to his 1,000 yards because I think this year was the 10th year in a row that he's gone for 1,000 yards.
11, actually, yeah.
Is it 11? Yeah. Terry's on his own path. He's younger than Mike Evans, but he's working his way towards those same kind of milestones. And the way that, you hear the national media talk about Mike Evans, particularly like the selflessness department and the way that he, has talked about trying to open up the passing game for other guys in Tampa. I think you talk the exact same way about Terry McLaurin here in D.C. And he's a couple years away from, I think, garnering kind of that big time national attention the way that Mike Evans does. But I think as you look at the progression of Mike's career, despite the fact they got to play with Tom Brady for a couple of years, I think there's a lot of similarities that you can draw with Terry. And certainly as we get into this weekend, I think it's almost poetic that those two are going to be up against each other in the first round of the playoffs.
Mitch Tischler, co-host of the Beltway Football Podcast, with us here on the Hoffman Show. So, Mitchell, we kind of went into this conundrum earlier in the show that there's a lot of stuff that I think we are looking at, and not just we, media or fans, that the Commanders coaching staff is like, that's not going great right now. Don't love that. And yet they've won 5 in a row. How do you start to make sense? And as you and JP talk about this stuff on the pod, do you find yourself being more pessimistic about the quality of the performances, or more optimistic about the fact that they just went undefeated in December and January and now are headed into the playoffs having won 5 straight games?
Heck no. I mean, yeah, there's certainly plenty of things that you can point to that aren't going great. And, as you look at the run game and the pass defense and the play at corner, all those different things, sure, you want better, but I think this team knows that they need to be better at it, and it's something that they'll address in the offseason. We came into the season knowing that they didn't really have a number 2 receiver. We came into the season knowing that the secondary DBs were going to be a little bit of an issue, and yet this team found a way to still come away with 12 wins and do everything that they did. You know, you were looking at a team that's riding a 5-game win streak, and it's all because of number 5. It's all because of Jaden Daniels. And I think as you look at this playoff structure as we move forward, you're playing the Bucs this week that, you know, you can outscore. You can win a shootout with them. And quite frankly, I think that's how this team is going to have to go about, you know, winning games. It's going to be about ball control. It's going to be about moving the ball down the field. It's going to be about what they're able to do with number 5, both in the pocket and as he runs the ball. And, you know, there are a lot of deficiencies on this roster, and we knew that coming in. That's why we the coaching staff and all of us were talking about, you know, this being a rebuilding year. They turned over more than half the roster in the offseason, and yet they still found a way to win. And I think a lot of that comes from, you know, the physical ability that Jaden Daniels has. But I think you also have to give this coaching staff and Dan Quinn a ton of credit for getting these guys to buy in and be a team and be one and, you know, play together. And the results on the field aren't always great, but you don't see guys pouting. You don't see guys quitting on their team. You know, I think that's an important thing that particularly when you get to the playoffs, the you know, that big famous word that we all love talking about, the culture that DQ has built is pretty dang strong.
So if we take the premise that the main driver of their winning is Jaden, does how he played and the lack of production on Sunday in the first half before he swaps out for Marcus give you any pause going into wildcard weekend?
Absolutely zero. Like I said when we first started, if they were going to go out there with the game plan that they had in that first half with Jaden, I would have rather they just sat him and not even, you know, worried about him taking hits. I think not having Tyler Biadasz out there was a big part of that. I am hopeful and optimistic that he's going to be back at center, but ultimately, you know, what happened on Sunday in what for the starters or for Jaden was essentially a preseason football game for him doesn't particularly concern me. The lack of a running game still concerns me. The lack of ability to get any push on both the offensive or defensive lines certainly concerns me. But Jaden not doing a whole lot in, you know, whatever it was, 24 minutes of football isn't 30 minutes of football isn't the worst thing in the world.
So for whatever it's worth, I agree with you. And I think that the performance on Sunday and watching it back on tape and in 15 minutes here on the show, it's the Hoffman Show, Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Mitch Tischler, co-host of the Beltway Football Podcast, is with us for his weekly spot here. But in 15 minutes, we'll have the Jaden Daniels Take Command Tape Tuesday, where we let everybody hear what Logan and I saw when we watched it on tape. And the short version is, Mitchell, like, it actually wasn't that bad from a mental standpoint. He just missed throws, and I don't know why he missed those throws. I don't know how much practice time he got last week. You know, obviously the last 2 weeks, the schedule's been a little funky. Christmas 2 weeks ago, New Year's this week. I don't know if they went more walkthrough. It certainly seemed like the amount of guys they rested on Wednesday, it was not a full practice by any stretch of the imagination. And when earlier in the season, he kind of went through a rut throwing the ball. We chalked it up some to the rib injury, but there was also less practice time because they were in that like whatever 3 games in 12 days or whatever they had with the Thursday nighter a couple weeks ago, or at this point a month plus ago. So I actually looked at the tape and was like, oh, he'll be fine. Like, they just have to get back on their P's and Q's in practice this week versus what I think it felt like in real time, which was like, something's not right here. Like, he's not seeing it well. Just it feels clunky. And there was some of that because the O-line was contributing to the clunkiness and the lack of a run game. But when he actually like went back to pass outside of a couple of plays, I think he saw it pretty well, got the ball in the direction it was supposed to go, and then it just went off dude's fingertips like 7 or 8 times.
Yeah, I mean, and it wasn't just throws from Jaden that guys couldn't catch because Diami threw a dime to OZ in the end zone that he dropped. But I chalk up a lot of the mistakes to the fact that it was a Week 18 game, as you said. As I keep trying to say, it was almost a preseason game in terms of the way that they dealt with Jaden there. you're right. I didn't think that he made poor decisions. I was a little alarmed by how the offensive line was protecting him. I mean, obviously Micah Parsons is a all-world pass rusher, but the fact that he was able to beat Michael Dieter, as quickly and as easily as he did on a few occasions is a little concerning as you look at next week, because Vita Vea is a load in the middle, and if he gets under your pads, you got no chance of slowing him down. So it's going to be a big matchup for Biotish there in the middle if he's able to go, and obviously if not, Dieter. But it was a sloppy game. This team has been quite sloppy early on in games for most of this season, and it's not a great feeling to not feel confident that this team's going to come out and be ready to go, in the first half, or be clicking on all cylinders in the first half. But I think that this Bucs passing defense presents opportunities for the Commanders to move the ball down the field a little bit, and we saw it in Week 1 when Jaden was able to get loose with his legs to the outside a little bit and was able to hit Eckler for a couple of those nice little passes, and Brian Robinson for a couple of those nice little quick shots that they were able to take for 20 plus yards. I think that's a part of the game plan that, as we've matriculated through the season, we haven't seen them use the running backs in the passing game as much. Certainly part of that is Austin Eckler, being out with a concussion for the past 4 weeks. I think he's a big part coming back. I think he can be a big difference maker. And it's going to be, there's going to be opportunities for Jaden to find Terry, to find, OZ, to find Jameson down the field a little bit. And I think to win this football game, they're going to have to hit a couple of these longer passes.
Oh, yeah, for sure. The explosive plays have to come back, but there was a couple opportunities. I would definitely say everyone should stay tuned for Logan's vantage point as someone who's in the end zone where OZ dropped the ball on the Diami one. Interesting insight from Logan on that one that folks will hear in about 10 minutes. Of course, there is the whole other side of the ball, Mitchell, where Baker Mayfield has thrown for 4,500 yards and 41 touchdowns this year. He's like the 10th guy in NFL history to throw for 40 touchdowns in a season. The other 9 are Hall of Famers. So just an absurd year production-wise for Baker Mayfield against a Commanders defense that definitely missed Quan Martin this weekend, definitely missed Marshawn Lattimore this weekend, is hoping to get those two back. Quan's was just an illness. We all know Lattimore's got the hamstring. How confident are you that this defense, with those pieces back in place, can step up against a Tampa offense that gave it to them pretty good in Week 1?
Listen, I'm not going to sit here and say that this team is going to shut down Baker and company. I think a big difference maker was Jalen McMillan in that first game. Was wide open, particularly in the first half, on 2 or 3 little, kind of wheel routes, rub routes with the other receivers on the outside. And Baker was just a little bit off and missed them. Otherwise, that first half that the Bucs, I think, were up 17-7 at halftime, could have easily been, 24 or 31 if Baker was a little bit more. So, but we've seen this secondary, which, in years past have had issues with the communication stuff. We haven't seen that as much this year. I think the Bucs game, they were still working through some things. And obviously, if Lattimore is able to go, that just creates an entirely different, situation for this team. I mean, we all know about the Lattimore and Mike Evans, incidences that they've had, the fighting and the shoving and all those different things. They played each other in 13 games. Mike Evans has gone for 34 catches for 567 yards and 3 touchdowns in 13 games, all well below his career average. Lattimore clearly gets in his head. And for Marcus Lattimore, he has a pick. He's got 13 passes deflected when he's covering Evans in those matchups, a forced fumble, a fumble recovery. In the playoffs, he had a couple more pass deflections. I mean, this is a guy that can shut down their number one receiver. And I know folks are going to have in their head what happened, against Philly and all the PIs and all those different things. I think this is a little bit of a different situation where it's not just about, the physical play on the field. I think it's also a massive head game. And clearly, whatever started with these two early on in their matchups in the NFC South, it's a thing. I mean, Mike Evans is clearly not the same football player he is versus Marshawn Lattimore versus the rest of the NFL. And so it's going to be important that Marshawn's able to get out there. And if he's not, I think, you're going to have to hope that, some bubble gum and tape are able to keep the secondary together and stop Baker from hitting any of those explosive downfield plays.
Yeah, let's tape the flag in the referee's pocket on St. Juste's side of the field. Please no more of that. By the way, in that week 1 game, how about this for a throwback, Mitchell? I just pulled up the snap counts. In that game, going down the list, Emmanuel Forbes played 34 snaps in that game. Fedarian Mathis played 23 snaps, which was 3 more than Dante Fowler played in that game. And Jamin Davis also played 13 snaps in that game. So that's how long ago this game was.
I mean, let's be honest. The Bucs are a better team today than they were in week 1 when the Commanders played them. But the Commanders are far and away a better team than they were when they played the Bucs. This Bucs team is a veteran team for the most part. The core group has been together. When they were playing in that week 1 football game, obviously everyone's knocking off the rust that they're knocking off, but that team that played together, they knew what they were doing. This Commanders coaching staff and this Commanders roster was both trying to figure themselves out. We were seeing players play in different positions. We heard both offensive and defensive coordinators talking about wanting to try and figure out where players played best. And, that was the first time they really got to see these guys with the bright lights on of a regular season football game. So things are a lot different today for Washington than they were in week 1. And for Tampa, they're a better team, but it's pretty much the same team we're seeing. So I expect this thing to be a lot closer and to be a really an incredible football game.
I totally agree. Can't wait. Sunday Night Football. It'll be on NBC. Mitchell and JP will be live on the Monumental Sports app after the game for their post-game show, the Beltway Football Podcast. You can also check out all their previews and everything else throughout the rest of the week. Mitch, always appreciate it, and we will talk to you again next Tuesday and hopefully be talking about a Commanders win and a matchup against, I guess it would be probably Detroit.
Listen, we'll see where they're going next week. Could be Philly, could be Detroit. Regardless, I'm excited. I think we're going to come away Sunday watching the Washington Commanders celebrate their first playoff win since, when.
A very long time ago. If they do, will you and JP do the post-game show from the pirate ship?
So the last time we were there, we tried to do the show from the pirate ship and were explicitly told that we were not allowed on it.
Honestly, there's zero part of that is surprising. Not a single thing.
That they care so much about that pirate ship down there. And that thing is awesome. And the cannons are hilarious because JP gets scared every year when we're down there and the cannons go off, as well as many other people. But it will be pretty fun. It'll be a pretty fun post-game show, and I imagine there'll be a lot of holy potatoes if they're able to come away with a W. You
know what you have now, though, that you didn't have last time. You got the 2025 DC Sportscaster of the Year, JP Finley. That's what you got this time. Yeah, JP got named. Maybe it's 2024, but JP Sportscaster of the Year in DC. Congratulations to your co-host. Take that medal, that trophy, whatever. Maybe it's just an email at this point. Show that to the people keeping the pirate ship. Take that, Tampa. Mitchell, thank you, sir. We'll talk to you next week.
I've always known JP as elite. I'm glad the rest of the world does too now.
See you, man. That is Mitch Tischler with us here on The Hoffman Show. When we get back, Take Command, Tape Tuesday.
With the second pick in the 2024 NFL Draft, the Washington Commanders select Jaden Daniels.
Jaden Daniels holds the keys to the Commanders' future.
Daniels is going to walk it in for the touchdown.
Take Command holds the keys to knowing how he played.
In the big moment when you needed to make plays, he just consistently made plays.
It's time for a Take Command Tape Tuesday
Jaden Daniels just lays it out there perfectly. What a throw.
on the Hoffman Show.
The old tale of two halves, Logan. Not just because they switched quarterbacks at halftime, but it really was, from an execution standpoint, two very different teams. But upon further review, upon watching it on tape, like, there were a ton of opportunities in the first half for Jaden Daniels, and he just wasn't able to hit them with the efficiency and the efficacy that he has this year. When you watched this first half offensively, what are some of the things that stood out to you about why they just could not get going?
Yeah, and I really think it just comes down to not only Jaden Daniels, but like a general offensive inefficiency. You know, like if you look at the first play of the game, it's stick or Patriot is what I would call it. So 5-yard out by the tight end, box fade by number 2, and then a hitch by number 3. And he is just a touch late to getting the ball out, right? And I think he could throw the stick to Zach, but I think he's reading the outside player, and the DB does a good job of breaking downhill, and so it kind of spooks him a little bit. And it was so funny when I watched. So on the sideline, you're kind of like, man, Jaden's not seeing it well. This is a tough game. And actually, when I went back and watched it, I was like, he's actually seeing it fine. You know, it's just like he's seeing it fine. And again, like in that situation, you're trying to get the ball to the hitch. You think you read the coverage a certain way. The DB's breaking on the hitch. You get a little bit nervous because it's a long throw. It's from the far hash. So you pull it down. And again, get a sack. Micah Parsons does a great job. But to me, that was I think that's the perfect play to like encapsulate his day, so to speak, right? It's the ball. I know where the ball should go. In some cases, I'm throwing the ball where it should go, but I just missed the throw. And I'm not missing it like dramatically. I'm missing it by inches in some cases.
Tons of balls off receivers' hands in this game.
And I think that was the thing. Like in the next drive, for example, it's 2nd and 15. They run this like pass 15 Willie. So it's like basically 12 personnel. The tight ends stay in. You get max protection, big play action fake. Terry gets a little bit bogged down on the release. Kind of there's some traffic, but he gets through. And Jaden, I think, to me, like layers this perfect ball to space. And you're like, wow, what a read, what a throw. And it's just outside the fingertips of Terry McLaurin. And that was the whole day. Like that was the whole day, right? There was a hitch that was a little high for Terry. There was a comeback that was a little high for Terry. And on the review, I was like, actually, the ball is going to the right person. He's pulling it down when he should. It's just we're not getting these completions that have characterized his success throughout the season. Like we talk about him being so incredibly efficient, and then all of a sudden the efficiency's down for him, and the offense doesn't look as good. And I think that's the problem. And maybe a bigger picture problem heading into the playoffs, and we'll talk about this with the run game in a second, but like when you don't have something else to go to and you're solely reliant on that quarterback position to be excellent, this is kind of what can happen, right? When we don't have the rushing efficiency, when the pass game's not there, and Superman doesn't have his cape on, and he's just a normal quarterback for the first half of a game, like this is the result.
Yeah, I think that's... Yeah, dead on. I mean, the third drive of the game is like a great example of this as well. And like a little mental mistake added in. Third drive of the game starts with 3:25 to go in the first quarter. They run this play action deep comeback. It's open. He overthrows Terry. Terry jumps up to try to get it. It goes off his hands out of bounds. Second play of that drive, Austin Eckler, it might be his first snap back. It's certainly his first, what should be his rushing attempt. It's a zone read. And it probably is going to be a handoff, and then Austin goes the wrong way. So Jaden very smartly is like, well, if the read was that the running back should have gotten the ball, I'm going to go where the running back was supposed to go. And he actually picks up 5 yards on what for most people would be like a -4. And then on the next play, it's 3rd and 5, and he's picking his matchup. They run slants, 3 of them on the same side of the field in a 3-by-1, and he misses Terry barely on the slant. And that's a 3 and out where you have 2 good reads, and he actually makes a good play on a mental mistake by a teammate, and instead it winds up in 3 and out. And like that's in many ways the story of the first half, is just a lot of silly things that happen in the run game mixed with good decisions that are poorly executed in the pass game.
Yeah, and I think that's a perfect iteration. I mean, and then you go to the next drive, it's kind of the same thing. There's just his drives were all like that, right? It was like he has a completion on an RPO, which was great. There's a run for no gain. It's 2nd and 10, he takes a sack, and then 3rd and 10, there's kind of a pseudo drop. Again, it would have been a tough catch, but like that's the drive. So like you can't, like, in the same way we talk about defense having negative plays and then a couple greens in specific high leverage moments, the offense should look the other way. You got to have a lot of greens and only a couple of reds. On these first drives, I don't know exactly how many it is, but there's the first 3 plays, there's 2 reds, there's 2 sacks, right? The next 5 plays, there's a holding and an incomplete pass, right? There's 2 incomplete passes and a mental mistake on the next drive, and then there's a sack and a drop on the 3rd drive, and then there's an incomplete pass and an incomplete pass, and a Jaden scramble is the only positive play. That's pretty much the first quarter of the game. So out of how many plays was that, Craig? About 16 plays. I'd say over half of them were what I would call red plays. And that's just not tenable football. And whose fault is that? You know, Jaden Daniels a little inaccurate. They give up a couple quick pressures. There's a holding penalty on Bates, which is a tough block. I get it.
By the way,
Bates
I'm glad you brought that play up. Is that actually a holding penalty? Because like the guy comes at him, John like turns him and winds up like wrestling, moving him to the ground. But like, there's no actual grab. He just blocks him and like kind of, and not even a wrestling move. It's like a judo move where he uses his momentum against him and kind of chucks him to the ground. I don't know that that's actually a hold, but that's because I don't actually know the finite details of the rule.
Right.
As someone who actually should know that because that was your job, is that actually a hold, or does it look like a hold and it got called?
As someone who holds a lot, let me just tell you this real quick. So I think if the back had cut to the right of the block, it would have been fine. Like, you know what I'm saying? If the back had, like, so basically they're running to the left. It's like 12 lead, like old school, like 13 lead. So like we're going to base block. You're leading on the linebacker, like old school run. Like you haven't seen that run in a long time. Anyway, Kendricks does a great job coming downhill. If the back literally just puts his foot in the ground behind the block and cuts off Bates's butt, I don't think it's a hold. I think what they see is a guy bouncing it and then someone on the ground. And so when that happens, like 9 out of 10 times, like you're going to get a holding call. And that's another interesting thing we didn't talk about with the defense. There was a couple times where they had big plays and there was obvious holding calls on the interior that weren't called. And again, that happens every single game, but like talk about rushing efficiency and their rushing efficiency. Imagine if you had a couple more holding calls thrown in there.
I remember one like where John got held on like a Lance scramble, and you're just like, it's right at the point of attack as he's getting out. Why is that not a hold?
There was another one on Jerzon where he did a great job kind of playing back on a tight zone run, and the guy tackles him to the ground. And again, 9 out of 10
I remember
times.
that. Yeah.
Holding call, right? But
Yeah, it's like, and so pancake block in the stat sheet, holding call if the referee's
in real
paying
life,
attention.
yeah. But again, like it's happening in real time. You're bound to miss some stuff. But to me, that was one of those ones where, again, like it's a negative play. It gets you to 1st and 20, and it's just so hard to overcome that. And that's kind of what it was. And so Jaden's not as efficient as he is passing the football. And again, if you think back to his kind of that doldrum period, I'm trying to remember exactly when that was, kind of Pittsburgh, Philly, where he wasn't.
It's when he comes back, I mean, it really started with Chicago, where it comes back after the rib injury. So he gets hurt against Carolina, comes back against Chicago. They pull it out, obviously, and no one remembers anything being bad from that game because of the Hail Mary. But then you go Philly, Pittsburgh, Dallas the first time, really until the Tennessee game.
Yeah, and I kind of felt like that. And again, that was where they were practicing a little bit less. He was practicing a little bit less. And I feel like that's kind of what this reminded me of. They're just a little bit off on some throws, and this is the result. And again, the rushing efficiency is not there to sustain it and kind of deleverage him. So it was kind of those things. Again, and it's not like great insight. I don't know, like if you're a fan tuning in. But like that's what it is.
The quarterback should have put the ball more in the receiver's hands instead of off the receiver's hands.
And they should have run the ball. And they should have run the ball.
Here's what I would say though. Yeah, like I actually like the way that Cliff called it, and I think there's a ton of opportunities.
I think so too.
I think that's encouraging in a lot of ways. Like there are some guys open, and there's a couple of missed reads I think from Jaden, or things where at the very least he maybe stays on a receiver a little too long. Like there's one where he's like really staring down Terry and like he's got Ertz open over the middle, and you're just like, get to Zach. just throw it there.
I think I remember that one. Like, and this is just again like one of those kind of fun like football nerdy things. Is if it's the play that I'm thinking of, like Zach's running like a high cross, right? Is that what he's doing? Do you remember?
I think so. Yeah, I'm trying to find it in the notes, but keep going.
Yeah, and so basically, like, it looks like it's going to be open, but the backside...
11-19 second quarter. It's 2nd and 9. He wants Terry on an out. 86 is open, and he just never really progresses, and he pulls it down and scrambles into a -1 yard sack.
Yeah, I don't remember that play.
but like Zach's on the high cross. You're thinking of the right one.
But yeah, so I think so what I was going to say is that, like, you're looking at this, and you're like, man, that backside player... he's actually getting enough depth where I don't know if he can make this throw. And that happened a couple times where it's like he's open, but the backside player or the guy's driving on something, and you're like, man, like in the moment, I was like, he should have thrown this. But watching the film, I was like, I don't know if he should throw this. And this is actually like a better decision, a more understandable decision than I thought. You know what I'm saying? And it's just...
yeah.
And that was kind of a funny thing coming out of it, because I kind of was like, oh, he wasn't seeing it well. Like, that's why they didn't do it well. I actually thought he saw it fine. It's just you don't make plays, and that's the thing that is the deciding factor. And I think a great illustration of that is when Marcus comes in. You know, they throw the screen to Diami, they throw that little kind of quick slant to Austin, which kind of plays like a screen, and then he has the run for the first down. But then the next play is a huge completion to OZ, who makes an incredible catch, and it's one that he kind of, I'm not even going to call it a drop, but he had an opportunity, a similar one in the first half that Jaden kind of layered over the defender and he jumped up to catch it, but he drops it. And it's on the sideline kind of after like a little boot action. And that's not even talking about the reverse pass that he kind of flubbed. You know what I'm saying? So, but he makes this tremendous catch. And that's, two of them weren't made in the first half. You know what I mean? Right. And that's,
he drops what should be the easiest touchdown of his life on the Diami could not have placed the ball better, and OZ for some reason like tries to overhand it instead of underhand it, and it's just like,
I will say I was standing right behind the throw, which is one of the things about being on the sideline, which is like so fun. And that ball, it came out a little wobbly, but like, I'm not kidding, I've never seen a football do this before. Probably because he's left-handed and he's running to the left. It hooked like hard, like it almost looked like a punt. So I was like watching it, and I was like. And it kind of came out like it looked like it was coming right over OZ's head. And at the last second, it like tucks away. So I think he's thinking here. And then at the last second, he's trying to get back to the hands like that. But I would never have seen it. I was literally right behind it. And I was like, that is the craziest looking ball I've ever seen.
That's the insight people come to the podcast for. We're like, I don't know, better throws. And then on what looks like the best throw of the day, turns out it's coming off like a Tressway left-footed punt.
It came off like that. Maybe because he's running, I don't know why, but like it literally hard hook, and he should catch it. I'm not saying he shouldn't catch it, but I remember thinking like that is a tough ball because it's kind of fluttering and then it dives away. So one of those funny things I would never have seen if I hadn't been on the sideline.
For sure. And like I don't know what you actually call this or what you would call this in Madden. They call it shock option. Basically, you have 3 wide receiver side, outside receiver runs like a quick hook. Slot receiver is going to run the slot fade. And then number 1 is running, the closest guy is running an option route. So you can stop, you can go out, you can go in.
Right.
But like that outside quick hook, number 2 running the fade, the slot fade. That's the one that OZ hits, or Marcus hits to OZ.
Right.
Jaden's got one in the first half, same exact route concept, where he just underthrows Diami. And like, it's not a bad throw. Diami's gets hands on it, but like it's contested and it's knocked away.
Yeah, really good play by the defender, actually. Yeah.
But like, if Jaden can get that, we're out. Where Diami can run under it, like that thing's a touchdown. And like, it's the difference of a yard / the receiver making a hell of a play on one and not being able to make a hell of a play on another. But like that in many ways, I think was the difference. Was Marcus operated in the second half with like this great precision on a lot of throws, and guys made a couple of plays that were dropped in the first half, either by Jaden or on a left-footed arm punt by Diami. That was actually a
crazy. But I think that's a great point because Terry drops a slant. Like Terry never drops a slant, and it's a little overthrown. It's in a tough spot.
Dude, but then the catches Terry made in the second half, oh my god,
incredible! I was just about to talk about that. So like, it's a slant. I think it's on like a 3rd and 4.
Yes,
and the ball is down behind him and away, and I've seen that ball
and
dropped.
he gets hit while he catches it.
I've seen that ball dropped probably, I don't know, 9 out of 10 times, 19 out of 20 times. And he just makes a tremendous catch. And then there's that long dig that Marcus throws to him where he like dives in front of the receiver, the DB as he's making the catch. So my point is that
play was ridiculous. I'm like, how did Terry, like, if that
both
happened
of those catches
to you,
were crazy. Both
if
those
you
catches
were
were
the
crazy.
defense in Madden and you had that catch made on you, you would rage quit. You'd be like, this is BS. I'm starting this game over.
100%. But the reason I bring that up is Terry has, I don't even know if they're drops, but like even on the comeback, like we've seen Terry make that catch where he jumps up and the ball goes between his hands. Like that's tough. And then he makes 3, if you count the touchdown to win the game, 3 of the best catches you'll see all season, just straight catches, right? And then those plays weren't there in the first half. And so there is a little bit of variance. Could the quarterback be better? But also dudes just went out and were like in baller mode for Marcus Mariota was in baller mode, but like they were actualized because literally 3 of the best catches you'll see all season. And Terry just was on one in the second half. And that's why he's one of the best receivers in football. But I guess that's what I'm saying. It's like, even when the quarterback's struggling, earlier this season, there's been times like this where the guys have made plays for him. And here it just didn't fall, which is nobody's fault. And in the second half, you get guys, Ozzie making a great catch, Terry making 3 or 4 great catches, Diami making plays, right? Like they were able to stack stuff because the whole offense was kind of playing with more continuity, which was great to see them supporting Marcus like that.
For sure. Okay, the part, I'll try to think of something happy to end on. But while we do that, let's talk about the run game real quick to wrap things up. Not to end on a sour note, but the running back run game is not looking good right now. And there's a couple nice carries in the game. I think Austin had a couple. And like the thing that stuck out to me on those carries is he's really decisive. And there's a trust level of like, the play's going to work. I'm going to run hard where I'm supposed to. And I'm going to hit the hole. And it worked out. And sometimes it's like a 7-yard game. We're not talking about 40-yarders, but like you're able to squeeze through a hole in the same way that Deuce Vaughn actually was able to do that. Smaller guys that are just like, I'm just going to squeeze through here and be hard to see. And you get to the third level and your safety comes down and tackles you for 7 yards. Sick. That's a successful run. Take that any day of the week. Where B-Rob, I feel like at times doesn't quite trust it as much. But what are you seeing in the run game, both from the backs, but I think also obviously they're just not getting a ton of movement up front. And so these times where Dallas is getting 4-yard gains that look like no gain, and then you realize the line of scrimmage has been moved 4 yards, Washington's are actually no gains or gains of 2.
Yeah, so again, like stopping the running the football is complicated and nuanced, and I say this every week, but it's an important point, right? So on the first carry of the game, I think they mistarget the run, right? Who is it? Dallas brings like a little run stunt. They kind of get bogged up in it. They should be taking the combination, I think, all the way to the front side player in the box. They don't. It's really messy. B-Rob, there's nowhere for him to run, really. There's the holding call that Bates has on one of the second runs of the game. Again, can't make that work. But also I feel like as much as the blocking surface has their issues, there are times where it's blocked up okay. And B-Rob, like you said, doesn't trust it, where he's trying to like bounce it on a zone read, for example. There's a time where it's like get downhill, trust that double team's going to get there and just hit it. And it's not going to be a huge play, but it's 3 or 4 yards as opposed to a net gain of 0. And so instead he like runs to darkness and gets tackled for 0 yards. So there's one where he screws it up. Then the next play, he trusts it, and the double team gets split, and he gets tackled for a 0-yard gain. So, like, everyone, it's not B-Rob, right? It's not the offensive line. It's like they're kind of just not on the same page. And I think that's something that that is going to be interesting to watch if they can kind of find that continuity. Because we've seen them at moments, like in the Atlanta game, I thought they did a good job getting back to some of the stuff that worked for them. And then I think when you look at like this game, you're kind of like, man, this was like really clunky. This wasn't very good. This combination wasn't good. This line movement really jacked them up and it put them in a bad spot. They ran bounce, excuse me, where B-Rob ran for like basically, or it was a holding call on somebody, and B-Rob basically ran for like no yards. But because of how they're running it, he's an offset gun, right? They're running to the tight end. It just gets strung out, and there's no crease. There's no crease made. Guys aren't winning one-on-ones in the blocking surface, and that's just tough sledding. And so what I would say is, like, much like stopping the run, really good run games are very detailed. Who are we going to? What's our footwork? How are we getting there? And so if those guys can improve, that'll help B-Rob. And then B-Rob, can you approach it with the same level of detail where it's like, hey, I'm going to trust this run to be an A-gap run, and I'm not going to bounce it too early. And that's really hard to do when it's been so clunky over the course of the last couple of weeks. You got to just trust it though. And if that's my message as the offensive line coach, Anthony Lynn, the running backs coach, I'm just saying, hey man, it hasn't been super clean all the time, but we can get it clean. And when it's clean, you got to make sure you're hitting the right spot. And I think you saw, like I like the word you said, trust, right? Austin's really trusting it, and he ran with confidence. And I felt like B-Rob wasn't always trusting it, and there were times where he wasn't running super confident, and it makes total sense as to why. I think he feels probably a lot of pressure. I would assume, I haven't talked to him, but I would assume there's a lot of pressure to be like, get the running game going, get back to what it was early in the season, and right now it's not there. And so O-line needs to play better, blocking surface in general needs to play better, B-Rob needs to play better, and I think that's just the nature of the inefficiency.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things off of that. One, I think this was an informative game to watch on the effect a running back can have, because I think there's a couple of times where Dowdle really presses the front side and then is able to make really smart cutbacks, and he actually dips a few tackles for loss, so it's even muddy in the backfield, but he pushes long enough that once he slips that one tackle, now he's got a big crease. He's able to get 5-6 yards. There's one where I remember he makes Jalen Holmes miss. There's another where he makes Luvu miss, and like these are really good cuts, but you press it enough that maybe your offensive lineman can get a piece, and that is enough to avoid the tackle for loss versus slowing your feet, like trying to juke a guy in the backfield. It's like just press one hard cut, and maybe you can get, Dan talks about the art of breaking tackles, and like you can kind of get on someone's arm instead of in the middle of their body.
Sure.
And that's enough to get out of the backfield unscathed, and then everyone else has done enough that you get 5-6 yards out of it. The other thing that I think is interesting, specifically going into the playoffs, is for as bad as the running back run game has been, the quarterback run game has been excellent. And even on some of the design stuff. And typically in the playoffs, we see teams with running quarterbacks not throw caution completely to the wind, but certainly up the dosage of, hey, we're going to have Josh Allen run more. We're going to have Lamar Jackson run a little bit more. We're going to be a little more aggressive with some of those calls. And I do wonder if they will run Jaden more in the playoffs, and if that threat / that potential success can open the running back run game back up, because teams are really going to be scared of Jaden ripping off 20-yard runs on a regular basis with, John Bates or Ben Sinnott out in front on some arc option type of play.
No, I think that's a great point. I think that's something that it's always a trump card. It's always a trump card. I think I was watching Dallas, and they had a run with Trey Lance on the perimeter, and I just was like, there's no good answer here, right? It ended up being like a 10-yard gain, and I think they actually handed it off to the running back. But basically, they brought someone across the formation. Jeremy Chin, or the DB has to match the person coming across. Mm-hmm. Trey Lance boots out. Jeremy Chin kind of plays back, and I'm like, he has to do that because the quarterback's involved in the run game, and then the back hits it up kind of right in that crease. And I just think, I think that's going to be a big part of the offense moving forward. I think when you watch the Atlanta game, like the true playoff kind of feel of that game, like they ran the quarterback a ton, and Jaden ran the ton, and it is the ultimate trump card because it makes it so hard from a numerical standpoint to play defense effectively, and I do think that's something you'll see a lot more of, and hopefully it loosens up. I think too. I think if they can, some of it just comes down to targets. Like if you can just clean up some of the targets, like one of the things about the Dallas run game, which I really appreciated, is they were targeted effectively in this game, and all that means it's like, hey, the first combination's going to that guy. Everybody else, like, these are the people you're going to. And they just executed it really well. And were they always perfect? No. But I think that, to me, is, if you want to clean up a run game, really get coached up on the targets. And one of the things about the stuff that Cliff does, and it's great, and it's super effective, when you motion a lot before the run, it makes some of those targets harder, right? It makes some of when you're running novel runs and they present a new front, it makes the targets harder. So what I would kind of say is, like, can we find something where the guys feel extremely comfortable and just like, hey, we've run this 1,000 times, we know how to target it, and it's not going to be the best, but at least the floor of the run is going to be a little bit higher. And then we get those 3-4 yard carries like we were earlier in the season. So kind of juxtaposing the two rushing attacks, like the back was excellent, right? But I think the back's also excellent because he understands where the blocking surface is and who's getting blocked and how he can maximize the run. And so I think that's something I would just kind of keep an eye on. Quarterback runs, targets on the runs, and I think that'll raise the efficiency heading into the playoffs.
Want more from Craig and Logan? Subscribe now on the free Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts. More Hoffman Show next on the Team 980 and the free Odyssey app.
Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Coming up just 10 minutes from now, we will talk to Dave Johnson on a Wizards game day. Wizards and Rockets tonight over at Capital One Arena. But right now, Anthony, quick, we are going to go through a reset of our NFL tier rankings. So all the teams that made the playoffs, goodbye. We can do this quickly because we don't have to talk about you anymore. So what we need to do is reestablish the parameters here. Which teams are we giving no chance to win this weekend? Which teams do we think, I guess they're interesting, but they're probably ultimately not good enough? And then which teams do we give a puncher's chance that we're going to say not only can win one playoff game, but could win two? They could wind up in the conference championship game. And then which teams are we saying are the actual prime contenders? I say we start from the bottom and work our way up, because I only think that there's one team in the NFL playoffs that has no real chance of winning this weekend. And if somehow by hook or by crook they were to win, they have absolutely no chance of winning two playoff games. Anthony, do you care to guess who that is?
You're going to say the Houston Texans.
That is correct, Anthony. I believe that the Houston Texans are the sole playoff team in either conference that legitimately has no shot of winning a playoff game.
I agree with you, sir.
All right. Now that we got that taken care of, interesting, but not good enough. I don't know how many teams are actually going to wind up in this tier. That's kind of the thing about these playoffs is it's a lot of good teams. I got one, though, at the very least one, and that's the Pittsburgh Steelers. I just think they have fallen apart to the point that I mean, especially because they got to play Baltimore, but I kind of think that they're toast.
Yeah, I will want to add a second, but I agree the Steelers have hit a wall and fallen off a cliff.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's actually I think you're right. I think there's one other AFC team that belongs in here.
Yep.
And that team is the Denver Broncos.
Yes, sir.
All due respect to Denver, who is kind of punchy. And I think you could make a case for them in puncher's chance. The problem is they're the 7 seed. So they're going to have to go if they were to somehow upset the Buffalo Bills, they would then just go to Kansas City.
Which would be crazy too, though.
Yeah, division. I mean, they just played obviously a very different version of Kansas City. Look, this Denver team is rolling. They're punchy. I just don't know if they're playoff punchy, especially in an AFC where they have Bo Nix. All due respect, who I think had a great rookie season, has come on really strong here at the end, had a phenomenal game in Week 18 in a gotta-have-it situation. But you got Bo Nix, and they got Josh Allen, and Lamar Jackson, and Patrick Mahomes, like Justin Herbert. And I guess that's the other team. Where do the Chargers belong?
I was also thinking they're interesting and not quite good enough. I don't trust their receiving core, Craig. I don't trust Quentin Johnston to go out there.
Fresh off 13 for 186?
And look, I'm not going to lie. He had himself a game, but
of course, it's the first one he's really had.
Consistency, man. He has not been consistent all year.
I literally just saw
really our thing.
I literally just saw a screenshot in my Instagram of his 13 for 186 being a career high, and I was like, no kidding. No kidding, those are his career highs. Here's the only thing about the Chargers.
Okay.
They're facing the Texans in round 1. So, barring something unforeseen, considering we put the Texans in no chance, they're already into round 2.
True. So I guess they have a chance, but at the same token, it's just.
You know what? I'm with you. We're sorry. Look, if the Broncos are there, I think the Chargers are there, and that's said respectfully to the Broncos.
That's fair.
And frankly, if it wasn't Mike T, I think the Steelers. I don't know. I almost want to put the Steelers down, but I don't trust George Pickens to have fully quit. Although it appears that George Pickens is fully quit. All right, so LA Chargers, you're going an interesting but not quite good enough, even though you kind of have a first-round bye, as much as you can have in these playoffs. Is there any team in the NFC that we're going to put below puncher's chance? It feels insane to not?
I'll have one. The Green Bay Packers.
Are you saying the Christian Watson injury is enough to knock them down?
No, it's not just Christian Washington. It's also Jair Alexander. I think
you're probably right.
I think those two injuries.
I think you're probably right. I just think that, like, Love has been a little bit off all year. They just finished with a terrible loss to the Bears, so it's not like they're coming in hot.
Yeah.
Love is banged up. Malik Willis is banged up. Like, there's a whole bunch of not good. Christian Watson's their only deep threat. So they have a million receivers, but none of them are actually that good.
And you got to be able to create separation. They struggled doing that against the Lions. You know the Eagles are going to do that. So I don't know.
I think for the Eagles, you have to be able to take the top off the defense, a la what the Commanders did, and
they don't have
the
that.
Packers don't have the dudes to do it.
Nope.
And then defensively, without Jair to do anything with AJ and just there, it's too much. I think you're right. I think the Packers, which would make sense, they are the 7th seed. And by the way, if they were to somehow pull off the miracle and beat Philly, like they ain't gonna beat Detroit. I don't think, but it's division, and that's the thing is you have 3 NFC North teams, which I think is messing with my head. All right, puncher's chance. I think Washington belongs here.
Yep.
I think there is a chance that Washington could wind up in the NFC Championship game because I think, honestly, it would take a Green Bay win, I think, because I feel better about the Eagles. I think if this team plays Detroit, that is going to be a long day at the office with what Detroit is able to do offensively. But Washington could also have a day offensively. Like, they can create plays, and they are not scared of anyone. If they got 5 and 5 is right, they got a chance. Washington Commanders, you're going in puncher's chance. I believe the Minnesota Vikings belong here as well, which isn't really fair to the Vikings to put them in the same tier as the Commanders, considering the Vikings were last seen playing for the number 1 seed. However, I think you see when that like high leverage, there's still just a little too much Sam Darnold, and Sam Darnold, like, I hate that for him, but like he really played his worst game of the season, and maybe I'm overreacting to that, but am I?
I mean, I don't think you're off. I think he definitely did. He missed some throws he should have had, but also
I literally, as I started typing Anthony, I started typing Sam Darnold instead of Minnesota Vikings.
No, the Lions put
right.
those boys in the bag, man.
I'm gonna say the Vikings. The Vikings are in puncher's chance.
Yeah,
probably the heavyweight, so to speak, in puncher's chance. But I think they're in puncher's chance. Them making the Super Bowl would be a bit of a surprise to me coming out of the NFC. All right, in the AFC, are the remaining teams that we haven't talked about, are they prime contenders? Buffalo, Kansas City, and
the Ravens.
And the Ravens, or any of those belong down here?
I think they're all prime contenders. Chiefs, back-to-back defending champs, and then you got the 2 MVP contenders. I think they're all prime contenders.
Okay, which means we just have one team that we kind of forgot about. The Rams. Or the Rams and the Bucks. Those are, I guess, the 2 teams that we forgot about. Well, the Eagles I didn't forget about. I know where they're going to wind up.
Yeah.
So let's just do it this way. Prime contenders, Eagles, Lions, Chiefs, Bills, Ravens. We agree on those.
Yes, sir.
So are we saying Bucks, Rams, puncher's chance? Could they wind up in the NFC Championship game?
I think the Bucks more so are interesting. I think the Rams could end up in the
I have a hard time putting a Bucks team below the Commanders team that they are favored over and hosting a playoff game against.
True. It hurts. It's tough.
I know they did finish with the worst record, though. The Commanders are a 12-win team.
Banged up though, Craig. Like,
I don't know how banged up they are though. Outside of Godwin, I kind of think they're starting to get. I'm scared that they're going to get healthy and that Winfield comes back and that Dean comes back and it's a very different looking Bucks defense. I think they have a puncher's chance. I think the Rams. I think belong in interesting but not good enough.
Okay.
I don't think the Rams are. I just
despite their offense.
Despite their offense. Their offense also hasn't been nearly as good in like a month.
It has not.
I think that's probably relevant. Their defense is really young, is what it is. All right, so prime contenders, Eagles, Lions, Chiefs, Bills, Ravens, puncher's chance, Commanders, Vikings, Bucks. That feels very homerish, but I don't care. Steelers, Broncos, Chargers, Packers, Rams, interesting but not good enough. No chance, Houston Texans, That's the playoff edition of the NFL tier rankings. Up next, Dave Johnson, live from the broadcast booth at Capital One Arena. But first, let's get an update on the latest in the world of women's sports, presented by Wawa. Chicken, how you wanna, at Wawa, with crispy and roasted chicken sandwiches.
What would one?
It is the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. And joining us live from the booth at Capital One Arena, it's Dave Johnson. Dave, how we doing?
We're ready to rock, and we're feeling Commanders fever as well. And by the way, somebody asked me about that today on social media, where all questions are asked.
Of course.
Can the Commanders make the Super Bowl? And that's the thing about the NFL playoffs. You just get in the way it is now, and there's every possibility. That's why the NFL, keeps drawing 1 billion viewers every week or whatever their numbers come out to be. So on any given Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Friday, and all the days they play, once upon a time it was on any given Sunday. But I think they have as good a chance as anybody.
Yeah, I mean, hey, if you got Jaden, you got a shot. Do we have it, Dave?
How's that for playing to the home audience?
What else are we here for?
That's right.
Are we aware of the record for the Wizards when Jaden is in the building this year?
Because
he's come to at least two.
Yes, and that's a good point. And his mother told him to not be on the telephone or cell phone, looking at his cell phone. I don't know. Do you know?
I don't. I know.
We should check that.
Yeah, it was one of the games that I was
I
at.
think he was at a win recently. So, and that would be significant, obviously. So I will look into that. I will have our research analysts do that.
Okay. Well, these are the important questions that we're trying to solve here on the Hoffman Show. Question that Brian Keefe and his staff are trying to solve is, why do all these great players keep putting up just performances of the year against the Wizards, going back to 2 games ago against the Pelicans, where CJ McCollum drops 50 on them? And this has unfortunately been a pattern in the last couple of years where, yes, Giannis and Anthony Davis and CJ McCollum and the list goes on are tremendous basketball players who occasionally drop 50 points in NBA games. But there has been, I would imagine, if you're in Brian Keefe's chair, a little bit too much consistency of that happening to the Wizards. What has he said about some of the individual brilliance that opponents have been able to pull off against this Washington squad at this point in the season? We
really have not asked him about, individuals. I mean, look, CJ McCollum had 50 on Friday, and I off the hand, I don't know what he had on Sunday, but he didn't have another 50-point game. So it's going to happen. On the flip side, when the Wizards had those kind of scores, and certainly a Jordan Poole can go off for 30 or 40 or whatever. So what you have to look at, and this is where the season is going beyond numbers like that. They lost on Sunday. Yes, the Pelicans hit a bunch of threes, but they held the Pelicans to 41% shooting. 41% from the field. I understand about the threes, and the threes count. But what Brian Keefe talked about in the post game, and if you look at the numbers, and Brian Alvin did a great job on our pregame show on Wizards Radio 24/7, just breaking out. The Wizards are among the top-ranked. When I say top-ranked, in the top 10 in several defensive categories over the past 5 or 10 games. So while there's situations like you just mentioned, CJ McCollum goes off for 50, and I know exactly what you're talking about. We feel like, wow, everybody has their career high against the Wizards, but there's also, sometimes it's funny how it's like with your relatives, you know them the best, and you're also the hardest on them the best. So, as much as we say it about our team, another team will say, oh, so-and-so always goes off on us or whatever. So the bigger picture is that, yeah, C.J. McCollum is going to get his 50, but are the Wizards better defensively in the month of December into January? And the answer to that is not just my word for it. You can statistically look at it when you take a smaller sample size, not the entire season, but if you take the last 10 games, you'll find the Wizards are making big strides that you can point to on defense.
Dave Johnson with us from the broadcast booth at Capital One Arena. And they played better defensively against the Pelicans the second time around than they did this past weekend the first time around. McCollum 25 in the second game. The problem was offensively, the Wizards also did not have the output.
Not to interrupt you, but think about that. In the NBA today, you hold a team to 110 points. That's a win, typically. The Wizards, and not making an excuse, but and it was great to have Kyle Kuzma back with 28, and the Wizards will never go there. But would that story have been different if you played that kind of defense and had Jordan Poole in his 25 points or whatever? So that's what I'm saying. It's still a loss. It's still too many three-pointers allowed, but it was not on a night when you allowed the Pelicans to shoot 48% from the field. There was some good within that game on Sunday, whenever.
Whatever that game was, the game that happened the other day.
Right.
That's not today.
Right.
Today's game is against the Rockets, and we are awaiting word, although, Dave, you probably have an update at this point. Jordan Poole listed as a game-time decision. We also know that Malcolm Brogdon is out for this one. Do we know when Brogdon will be back, and will we see Jordan Poole tonight?
We will not see Jordan Poole tonight, and Malcolm Brogdon. That's a situation where, he went off with a foot sprain the other night, and I don't know how long he's going to be out. We do get Bilal Coulibaly back tonight. I just got word that Alperen Şengün, the very talented Rockets center,
Yes.
he might be a late scratch with a hip injury. So, but you would. The good thing is. Jordan Poole, I don't think it's going to be much longer for Jordan Poole. He is someone, and we focused on this in the last pregame. He talked about it, why he plays through pain, why he's been through Final Fours and playoff basketball, and that's just part of it. So if Jordan Poole cannot go, he really cannot go. And in other words, he's having a seatbelt put on him because he will play through anything, as evidence of the game that went to overtime where he initially hurt the hip against the New York Knicks, and he came back when we thought he wouldn't, and he still played through. So, he's as tough as it comes, and you hope it always sooner than later, but I never have a timetable for anybody.
All right, well, Dave, we'll let you go chase down the Alperen Şengün news and otherwise get ready as Dave and company are on the air in less than 20 minutes. 6:45 is pregame tonight here on the Team 980. Tip follows at 7. Dave, appreciate your time as always, my friend.
Always look forward to the next get-together.
Which should be tomorrow, right? We got a back-to-back situation?
Back-to-back, yes. So I'll try to be better tomorrow.
I think you did just fine. If you could just repeat this performance tomorrow, we'll be great.
Okay.
All right, we'll see you then. That's Dave Johnson with us here on the Hoffman Show. When we get back, we have not had a Real Things Real People Said in real microphones, I feel like, in forever, because we've had all kinds of crazy stuff happening. And there's some very, very good ones today, including a John Riggins story from Howie Long. If I can't get you to come back after the commercial break for a John Riggins story from Howie Long, then I got nothing for you. Real Things is next. Hoffman Show on Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Super producer Anthony Haney over there, Craig Hoffman here. It's me, the Hoffman Show. I think people get it at this point, Anthony.
What'd you say?
I said I think people get it at this point.
Oh, yes.
I don't know, every once in a while you'd be surprised, Anthony, how often people are like, wait, you have a show? I loved you back on the Fan in like 2018. Like, thanks for keeping up.
A long time ago.
Yeah, I mean, hey, better late than never. So I just always assume that there's new people listening.
Was this early 2018 or like?
I made it. That was a hypothetical.
Oh, because I was about to say I was still in college, man. I wasn't going to talk about how old you are, but
what? When did you graduate?
You said when did I graduate?
Yeah,
2018.
Oh, in 2018. No, I mean I started on the Commanders beat for the Fan in 2016.
Ah, okay.
I think. Was it 2017? No, it was 17, 18, and 19. I did pregame in 16.
Okay.
So 17, 18, and 19 seasons were my 106.7 The Fan beat seasons.
I love that for you, man.
Yeah. You were covering Syracuse football and basketball.
Yeah.
And lacrosse, because that's what happens up there. Did you do any lacrosse?
Did I?
Yeah. Like,
no.
Cover it.
No.
Did you ever go to a lacrosse game?
I went to one.
I remember I went
and
to...
And the thing is, we're a lacrosse school, though.
Yeah.
I should have gone to more.
Yeah, I covered more women's lacrosse than I did men's lacrosse because of the radio stations, that the positions I had in the radio station I worked for and the timing of it because I was a transfer and all the different stuff that if people are interested, they can do a Q&A with me at another time. Doesn't really matter. But I remember distinctly going to like a UVA Syracuse 1-2 men's lacrosse game and almost falling asleep because I was really tired and it just didn't do it for me. Now that lacrosse can't be really exciting. It's just, I feel like lacrosse is actually a sport even more so than like football or soccer, even though they're played on literally the exact same field. Lacrosse is better on television.
Yeah, I like watching it on television unless I personally know the people that are playing.
Right. Well, that's different. When you can yell out to someone and you're like, if they hear my voice, that might mean something to them versus watching on TV, that's a different bit.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's definitely different. But for sports on TV goes, lacrosse, much better than watching what is a very condensed area of action on a very small part of the field, and then everyone runs to the other side, and then it's condensed action on another part of the field. It's just not as good in person. That's my humble opinion from a person who's been to one lacrosse game in his life. The whole lacrosse, Bickle and the lacrosse brigade are going to come after me.
Hold on, you've only been to one lacrosse game?
Well, one men's lacrosse game.
Oh, okay.
I probably went to a couple. I had to go to more than one, but I distinctly remember that one and remember like almost falling asleep and being like, man, this is bad. I'm like ashamed of myself. I think I was also tired. I was in college. Who knows?
We didn't sleep a lot.
Didn't sleep as much as I should have. But that's part of being in college sometimes. Now I'm an adult, and I wish I could sleep more. But I'm old, so my body wakes me up early. It'd be the life, kids. It'd be the life. All right, we got a couple things in the Real Things folder.
Yes, sir.
Let's hit it. It's time for Real Things Real People Said into real microphones.
Real things.
We're not going to be sucked this year.
Real people.
5 and 11, not very good.
Said into real microphones.
You know, the culture is actually damn good.
All right, I don't want to push this any further. I don't want to accidentally run out of time at the end. I haven't even honestly listened to the whole clip. I just know that Howie Long was on Julian Edelman's podcast, and he told a John Riggins story. And I got like 5 seconds in. I sent it to Anthony and was like, I want to hear this live on the radio. Ladies and gentlemen, a John Riggins story from Howie Long.
Riggins was a hammer. When I say hammer, I mean, you hit John, it was like the cartoon thing. I hit Riggins one time on a slant. Golly, the sky just went whoosh. He was just such a big load. He was Derrick Henry for that time. But he broke that big run versus Miami. I think it was in the Super Bowl of 40-plus yard. I think it was a fourth down run. So for a guy that big to be able to turn the Jets on going down the field, he was a load.
I just love the beginning. I hit him. It was like a cartoon. It was like the sky went whoosh. Yeah. And Howie Long's a big mamma jamma. And he hit people hard. And he's like, tackling Riggins sucked.
Do you think the shoulder pads back then helped a lot of the players? Because they really wore some big shoulder pads.
Define help.
Well, I don't know.
I think if you're Riggins, it helped because it gave you more to plow people over with.
Yeah.
If you're a defensive player, it restricted your movement, made you really bulky, and probably made you a bigger target to get run over. Yeah. I don't know how much that helped you actually deliver a blow. Yeah. In the way that defensive players do.
Yeah, because even looking at Riggins, you look at B. Mitch shoulder pads, like, why are your shoulder pads so big? But, I mean, I guess it does make sense, man.
I mean, those dudes had shoulder pads, neck rolls, thigh pads. Now dudes are trying to play in as little padding as possible. Yeah, but also they made it a lot safer where they don't need as much volume of pad to get the same protection.
Yeah.
And there's a little more freedom of movement. You ever tried throwing with shoulder pads on?
Yeah, when I was a kid.
Yeah. What these quarterbacks do is insane. Well, first of all, we take advantage that like dudes can just fling it 60 yards, or if you're Joe Milton, 80. Yeah. Second, like the shoulder pad is very much in the way of a traditional football throwing motion, the way that we would go play catch in the backyard.
Uh-huh.
So just remember, NFL players, they're not like us. What else we got in the folder of Magic Sound, Anthony?
So I'm not sure if you've heard, though, Craig. The Ball Brothers put out a song.
I've heard about it.
It's LiAngelo's song.
Mm-hmm.
Not LaMelo. Lonzo is one of the writers.
Okay.
So he helped with the song. But there was a reporter yesterday that got whiff of the song, I'm guessing over the weekend, because it dropped Friday.
Mm-hmm.
And the reporter got a hold of it. And since everybody on the East Coast is dealing with snow, he thought to use it on live TV. And this is how it sounded.
So when you're really trying to drive through here on these main roadways and turn into these secondary roadways, you might swerve, bend the corner. Whoa, I'm telling you, next thing you know, you find yourself.
Swerve, bend the corner. Whoa. He did a nice job. I mean, obviously that is played up with the music overlaid on it. But he kind of did a nice job of doing it where if you know, you know, and if you don't know, you don't know. Yeah. And to me, as someone who occasionally sneaks stuff in to the show, as he talks for many hours every week into these here microphones, I appreciate the subtlety. Not as subtle when it's overlaid with the actual track, but
the thing is, I think a lot of not just newscasters, sportscasters, they do it. Like Gus Johnson, do you know Boss Man D-Lo? He loves Boss Man D-Lo. He loves trying to.
But you have to be able to do it naturally. This is always. Yeah. I'm gonna. Do I want? No, I'm gonna be nice to the person. There's an ESPN broadcaster whose name I will tell you in a minute, less than a minute, because we're now. I guess now exactly 1 minute and 1 second from now when the show is over.
Yeah.
Who does it, and in his own way, it kind of works and is natural. But also, like, he's just kind like it's kind of clunky and feels forced, and I'm just like,
forced.
Just call the game, man.
Yeah.
It'll be better if you just call the game and speak the language. You have to be able to be slick with it, like, and it has to sound natural. Like that's what made Stu Scott great. Is like Stu Scott could do it and slip it in, and everyone's like, that doesn't sound like everyone else, but like he's clearly on top of it.
Yeah.
And I don't know that this person pulls it off. Quite in the same way.
The effort is there. The execution, needs a little tweak.
Yeah, it's just a little stilted for my taste. A little forced. It's like, just nobody. You're not doing highlights on SportsCenter. You're calling the game. Different bit. Anyway, that's our show. Dave Johnson's calling the game next. Wizards, Rockets, now on the Team 980.